Okay, guys. This is your opportunity to ask a CPS program director, anything except for one thing. And I'll tell you a story that I said that in the first question. What we don't want you to ask is, why was my proposal declined? Okay? That kind of thing, question's out of bounds. And my story was, I did that at an aspiring PI meeting for CPS. And the first question was, why was my proposal declined? So anything at all about CPS, what program directors do, how we kill our time, where we're located, how you can make sure you get an answer. I'll tell you one thing I did learn, that if I wanted to get in touch with a PI or a prospective PI to give them either good news or ask a question, you always called something like 5 o'clock their time, because they're free and they'll usually pick up the phone. That always worked. Okay, so any questions? This may be a very short session.
I don't think, yeah, it works. This is not really related to CPS only, but are panels going to be in person again? Is there any way, or we're going to do remote panels forever, or what do you think?
So, two things. One is panel. So the question was, is NSF going to be holding in-person panels? And the answer to that is yes and no. So first of all, there are 3 types of panels: in-person, virtual, and hybrid. Hybrid is people on Zoom or whatever tool, plus people in the room. So the hybrid panel is being totally discouraged. I think rightfully so, because it doesn't work well. In-person panels are an option, but they're generally going to be an option for high-value proposals, high-value projects, where significant discussion among the panelists is really required. And one has to make a very strong case up through the division and your directorate to get an in-person panel. For the foreseeable future, virtual panels are going to be the rule. Let me tell you, I'm in favor of it, in part, and I love in-person panels. But what I never loved was I would send 10 requests to be in a panel and get maybe 3 yeses. On virtual panels, it's kind of 6 or 7 out of 10 are available. And what we've found is that we get better gender and diversity on virtual panels, much better, not just a little better, much better diversity and gender on virtual panels, because we can allow people to go teach for an hour, schedule the discussion around that. People seem to be much more amenable. You couldn't teach if you're gone to a panel, an in-person panel. And frankly, it's much better for people out west who had to spend a whole day traveling to Arlington or Alexandria and to be there the next 2 days, and then probably have to leave late the second day and get back pretty late. So as kind of the answer.
Oh, I was good. Hi, David. I wanted to follow up on something you mentioned earlier. You said that innovation for equity is a federal priority. Where could I find? I was trying to look that up.
So there's a document if you do a Google search for federal R&D priorities, and it's I think under either OMB or OSTP, and you'll find it's really a great list. It's got innovation for equity, tackling climate change, and the thing that we try to do is within our program, we like to see that at least some of our that we are somewhat in alignment with those priorities. So for example, in Smart and Connected Community, equity is a big deal. Equity in transportation or other services. Same with our civic program. We built 2 tracks for this year, and I don't know if any of you proposed, but the first track was climate change, resilience to climate change, and the second track was resource management, improving resource management to enable equity, spanning a variety, could be transportation, could be pretty much any resource.
So this is one of these, I don't know if you can answer them questions, but if you look back over the past few years, I wonder if you've seen things which in panels routinely get people downgraded, so to say, in their one. I mean, one thing as a panelist, just to give you an example of kind of one of my pet peeves as a panelist, is that if somebody didn't bother to check the reference section that is even mildly usable, that probably means the rest of the proposal didn't receive as much attention as it probably deserved. So I wonder if there are pet peeves that you've had where it's clear that either the panelists or you personally think that there's simple things people could do to make the life of a panel or the life of the evaluation or the proposal, pushing it up the chain, so to say, easier, that we haven't covered yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understood all parts of the questions very clearly, but are you saying that, was your comment mostly on that the panelists do not read the reference sections, and what's the use of keeping so many references if people are not reading it? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I was just giving this as a example of a trivial feature, namely that people clearly have BibTech that has not seen a human eye, and where the proof of correctness tools that we have that were talked about earlier don't quite seem to apply, and they clearly indicate that nobody actually proofread the proposal before it went out. So this is a trivial example of a pet peeve of mine as a panelist.
Especially if it was your reference that was missed. And that frequently happens. But
yes.
Here's some pet peeves. First of all, playing games with the pitch of the proposal, making it so dense that you have to blow it up 150%. Another, and this was one that I found entertaining, it was a proposal, and there was annotation in there about we should strike this line out. It was like, how the hell did that happen? The other one is, obviously references being out of order, or figures that are totally illegible. And, you put in a figure, you shouldn't have to blow it up to 200% to read the content. And one of the last things, and this is a career proposal thing, but it may be, especially career proposal. Don't turn in an 11-page career proposal. You know, panels go, you know, they didn't have enough good ideas in there. Yeah, those are some. I'm sure my colleagues have some others.
Well, you know, sometimes people also mention their prior results in a very extensive way. Like, for example, I have seen proposals where people are actually stating an entire page of algorithm, which they have already published in a recent paper. So that's like a complete misuse of page budget when you are writing a 15-page proposal, right? So you don't need to say everything that you have already published in a paper. You can just cite or refer to it, essentially.
Yeah, well, and the other is thinking that I'm going to put every equation and have page after page of equation. And Kishan Bahidi in one panel, I won't say whose proposal it was, but he said, this is intimidation by equation. And and it was very true.
Especially with the ML and the AI proposals that we are inundated with these days, you know, so sometimes we get proposals where every single line is like equations and proofs and theories and stuff like that, which makes it even very difficult to read. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you get lots of proposals which are completely English and verbose and not one single line of equation at all. So both are kind of like extreme in some sense of reading and understanding, especially for people like us who are in engineering and CPS. We need a good balance of both verbosity as well as equations.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is really around broader impact, and I think the broadening participation component. So I really like what you said about not really going for activities that are novel by themselves, right? I mean, if you have something novel, great, but it doesn't have to be that. And in my experience, a lot of panelists look for that. I guess just the intellectual thing of, I want to see something fresh. Why is this, you know, this is not exciting that even though your university is doing something or something that maybe is effective, but just not exciting because it's been tried and true. And then people push back. Sometimes they push back overtly, sometimes tacitly. But I think that's a problem because sometimes those things that are tried and true are the ones working. And you should double down on them if they're working, even if they are not novel. So I'm happy you said that, but I'm just wondering from the point of view of panelists, how do we, or how do you just encourage us all to share that same value of what works and not just what is novel?
I think for broader impact first, I always say to the panelists to think about, you know, the PI is going to tell us what their broader impact is, broader impact to society, right? We can't tell the PIs what it should be. The writer the proposer has to tell us what they think the broader impact of their work is. It could be one thing. It could be saying your work is going to be impactful to industry, period, right? And that could be pretty significant. It depends on what you're doing. Or it could be that you're going to have a huge impact on outreach, right? So like I think what Dave referred to earlier was you don't have to have a laundry list and check off all the boxes. And I think as young faculty writing new proposals, you tend to say, okay, I have to do outreach, I have to do education, I have to do this, I have to do this. You don't have to do all that. So for broader impact, you should know what in society your work is going to do, right? You know, why should NSF fund it? Why should society care what you're doing, right? So you tell us that. The broadening participation is separate. I think we covered that earlier in the session. You know, that's trying to get more diversity into people who do this research in SCIs and CPS. Yeah, do you had a follow-up question? Sorry, I don't know if anyone
clarification. Maybe I wasn't very clear what I was asking. I hear what you're saying. We should propose the broader impact. So let me give an example. I don't know if it's CPS, but I've seen proposals that I've written and they say, well, they don't have they don't have any item where they are mentoring an underrepresented undergrad, right? Something like that. You know, they kind of, as though you've articulated what you want to do, maybe what you're passionate, and they just kind of pick it out like that. And I feel like that's problematic. First of all, it seems like you're checking a box, and if you don't have this box,
No,
problematic.
so the point of fact is that if I were running that panel,
Yeah.
and I know Phil Regalia and others, when they're in the panel, we really tell the reviewers, broader impact is not a checkbox. You don't need A, B, and C. And so if you have a proposal where that happens, I would apologize for them.
I don't think it was CPS. I'm just saying that
Good.
I'm happy to
Good.
hear what you're saying.
Good.
Yeah.
The thing that actually ticks me off a little in terms of broader impact is everyone knows you got 15 pages in a project description. Broader impact shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be, I've written 14 and a half pages. Right. I bet, or 15, I've written 15 pages already. I better shoehorn a couple sentences on broader impact. That comes across to me, and I think to reviewers, very poorly.
So,
and it actually happens, unfortunately, too often.
Sorry, just a quick, very quickly. So what, I really like what you're saying. I really appreciate that you push back in that way. So the other aspect of my question is when someone says, well, that's not novel. Because the research part, there's a novelty aspect. The intellectual part demands some novelty.
Broader impact doesn't have to be creative.
Right. But I hear that a lot, or people suggest,
it's good, and there's some career proposals, especially that have proposed, novel ideas with games and all that are kind of developed to, hey, get the students excited. But you don't have to be creative. But what you have to show in there is passion. Passion that you really care about achieving some impact.
Thanks.
So my question is about the CRII. So we have discussed today that the career proposal usually should not be your first proposal. And I always thought that the CRII was a great idea for young faculty to get started. But it looks like that the conditions to apply now have become so restrictive that most young faculty can basically not apply. So I'm not sure if this is a question or a feedback or, but I think it was great to have this opportunity to apply.
Let me suggest that I'm kind of happy that there's a controversy, and so CRII used to be open for anyone first and second year. And turns out, who are the winners? All too frequently R1, Carnegie R1 institutions. And frequently PIs that already have big startup packages. So the second change to that, or the next change to that, was you have to include something about a startup package and how much, whether that exceeds a certain amount. It got, you have to report it in the letter, and it was open to too much interpretation. If you got a $300,000 startup package, do you need this to start your career? So it morphed into, and just like ERI, I think it's ERI, which preceded us, it's meant now for institutions that at the time of submittal are not R1. And what's the idea? The idea is people are going to those institutions. They don't necessarily have big startup packages. They need resources that can help them. And what the result of it is, hey, CPS has gotten we used to have 2 or 3 panels worth, and we have a much tighter selection of proposals. And yes, some faculty at R1 institutions are excluded, but it's really going to the faculty at institutions that really could use the funding.
Yeah, thank you.
These are 2 easy questions, guys.
Thank you. I want to ask about how much does the panel look into past work of the PI when evaluating a proposal, and how is this different for example, a small or medium program versus career? So I ask this because, for example, especially for new faculty or for people who want to start a new direction of research that doesn't relate closely with their past work, how would they do this?
Oh, so I think prior work is important because it gives you a little bit of credibility in terms of when the panel is reading the proposal, especially if they personally do not know you or what kind of papers you have published in recent years. So prior work is very important, but at the same time, as I said, don't overwhelm all 15 pages with just prior work. You know, ballpark, I would say that keeping maybe 1 page to 1.5 pages is maximum. Don't go more than that, because you have so much more to say in terms of the novelty of the new things that you're proposing, what's the motivation, how you're going to validate that, and going deeper into what kind of new theoretical developments will happen from all these different tasks that you are proposing. So you have a lot to write in those 15 pages, including intellectual merit and broader impact. So if you spend a huge amount of space in just recalling what you have done, that kind of kills the page budget a little bit. So it's again a good balance, essentially, that how much you want to convey. But I think one very important point is that I have seen proposals where they're citing their prior work which is not directly related to the topic of the proposal. So don't do that. You don't have to say things about the papers that you have submitted which does not fall in the topic of what you're going to propose in the next 10 pages, for example. So try to use the prior work as a motivator of what you're going to propose.
There's, in the proposals, you have to put in your prior NSF results, right?
Yeah.
And, it looks bad if you put I've seen this, 3 pages describing those. Usually those are very succinct, and the thing that matters is, first of all, that you include them, but also you don't want to leave the panel the impression that what you're proposing is covered in that prior work. Right. And what you really need to do is make sure that you're distinguishing why it's different from what had already been funded, because that frequently becomes a panel question. Yeah, the thing I always tell people, if you were on the panel and had a proposal that had X, and you saw prior X minus, what question would you ask is, hey, what's different?
I see. Thank you. So how is this different or the same for career proposal?
So how's that different in career proposals? I don't think it's different at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
But can I make one quick comment?
Yeah.
So one comment that I wanted to make is that often many junior faculty belong to large centers. If you're a part of an ERC or maybe like an AI institute, for example, and the topic of your proposal is somewhat similar to whatever the other people are doing in that institute, I think it's very important for the junior PI to devote maybe one very dedicated section in their research narrative where you clearly point out that how your research is going to be very distinguishable from the overall theme of the center, for example, because that kind of creates a confusion in the mind of the panelists that, okay, so this PI is already getting some kind of funding from the AI Institute. How is this new career proposal going to allow him or her to establish their own niche, which is not covered by the other people, the other activities which are going in the Institute?
Thank you.
I'll also just add very quickly to that. I think David kind of brought this up already. If, let's say you have a prior NSF award, you've listed that, and it seems like the topic you're proposing kind of goes along with it or is quite similar. Every time that's happened, I've noticed that panelists will go and look up that past award that you had and the work that came out of it. They're very diligent about that, so this gets picked up. So they'll go in and see that, hey, this is very incremental based on what they've done in the past and things like that. So it's really important to kind of make it clear, like, what's novel, that's not covered by a previous grant or award.
I see. So then, for example, if someone submits several proposals before their NSF, and each previous proposal may have a little bit overlap or some part of overlap with NSF, do they need to be concerned? Sorry, the Korea proposal, I mean. So the overlap between Korea versus the proposals before Korea.
So what you almost need to be, so their career's a different thing. Mm-hmm. And, the question is, how is what you're building as your career, how has that perhaps contributed to help build that basis? So it shows credibility in, that, hey, you understand the program. It always helps if you're writing a career proposal that you have an existing, if you're going to cite some prior work, it's never a bad thing to cite prior work in that program and clearly distinguish it.
Thanks for your time.
And by the way, I don't know if size follows the same, but in engineering, if an award is made, then the program director actually reaches out to the PI saying that as a part, before the award actually can be officially made, you need to submit your most updated, latest, current and pending grant list, where you have to clearly distinguish that this project is significantly different compared to the existing project that you're running right now and the pending proposals that you have written in the last 1 year.
So we have one last question.
I think that's, thank you, by the way, for all of the wonderful talks. I actually had 2 questions, so I'm now debating which one to ask. You asked for a hard one, and so looking around the room and seeing many of the faces that I've recognized in some of the conversations that I've had in the hallway, there's a large number of people here that are giving up family obligations, especially in terms of caregiving, and especially with some students that I've talked to and some of my former students, it's a challenge to attend conferences, attend these events, be a PI while taking care of small children. Does NSF have support for the ability to have childcare on site for events like this so that, like in my case, I don't have to drop an infant off at grandparents' house with a 4-hour drive away?
So there's actually something that people now are encouraged to put in workshops, and I think also in conferences, which is really, here's some child care availability. Now, we haven't done it here.
Okay, and that's fair. I'll ask the other questions just because I know we're all trying to get out the door before rush hour. One of the things that I had a conversation last week with some partners from the EU, they centered on the fundamental difference between NSF funding versus European funding in the area of automation and also in automotive. The notion that we could do a really good job on our projects here in the US, and there's almost no reward for that. Whereas in their system, there's quite a bit of incentive to get the next project that's larger and larger and larger without necessarily going through that full peer review, start over from scratch process. I don't know that I would agree with that, but I do recognize one of their critiques is that a difficulty in connecting with industry with our projects as we go from essentially level 1 research all the way to technology readiness level 10. It seems like there's a big gap between some of the stuff that we're doing and perhaps like what Department of Transportation needs us to be doing. And I'm trying to figure out like how to fill, for example, in the area of autonomous vehicles, how to fill that gap a little bit better in transitioning research outward. So it's kind of like, I'll let you answer whichever dimension of that question you want. It's just something that I'm really struggling with in like, how do we do a really, really good job in getting that broader impact beyond our project?
So a lot depends on the specific activity. But what we did, for example, at Smart and Connected Community program is we had a set of awards from 2018 or so, looked at this set of those and said, ask PIs to identify, is there a transition to practice that you can build a story on? And some of that, industry could be part of that. It's also part of more rapid maturation of the technology. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize that one, you can bring industry into a project in several ways. So first of all, industry can't lead an NSF proposal unless there's some special requirements. But if you can bring industry in as a sub-awardee, because in that case, NSF is not funding, is funding you, you're funding industry, you're funding that organization. People have done that and have been successful. We have something called Transition to Practice on our CPS solicitation. And it allows you to define kind of a way to accelerate the maturation of the work. We had done a considerable amount before. One of the challenges is we like to see progress first before we commit, hey, this hasn't gone anywhere, but they've got this extra 4th year of funding. So we have in the past had a Dear Colleague letter looking for transition to practice, and we may look to do something similar to that, where you have to tell us why you think you're ready for it, what is the transition, and why do you think it's going to be successful? So those are things we've done. And you could do, there's goalie awards, which are special, which, we have done on CPS, and I know that there's some people here that have used those as a way of both having internships with an industry, as well as enabling that research to be, first of all, developed in an open way, and then tested perhaps on a more sophisticated real-world example. So, Rania?
Yeah. I just want to make 2 quick comments in answer to the question that you asked. So first of all, speaking about European projects, so there are programs within NSF where US universities can collaborate with European universities. And one specific example is Vanderbilt actually currently has a PIRE project. There's a program within NSF which is called the PIRE program. So Vanderbilt has a PIRE project with Germany exactly on the topic of these automated electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles and things like that. So that's number one. And the second one is that, as you know, there's a new directorate in NSF, which is called TIP, which is Technology, Innovation, and Partnership. And SBIR, STIR, Convergence Accelerator, and IUCRCs, which are all headed predominantly by industry. They have all these programs which earlier they belonged to engineering, but all of them have now transferred to TIP. So that's where I think industry can really make a difference in connecting with academia and national labs and other communities, for example. And who knows, in near future, maybe there can be a CPS component of TIP, for example, where you will see industry participating in the CPS program much more than just writing a letter of support. Yeah.
Okay, so
Thank you.
next up is we have a poster session. So